Thank you for joining us today for an online edition of Represent NYC. This afternoon, we're going to discuss how we can support our undocumented neighbors during these difficult times. COVID-19 has turned everything upside down in the past few months, with massive loss of life, unemployment, food, and housing insecurity, and a strained healthcare system. But one group of people who have been hardest hit by all of this is our undocumented neighbors. They are not eligible for federal relief because we have a racist and xenophobe at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. State and city government response has included them in healthcare, legal support, and benefits, but widespread fear about public charge has had a negative impact. These members of our community also tend to work low-wage service jobs that have been deemed essential, putting them at higher risk of contracting COVID-19, while others have been able to work from home. We heard loud and clear about the need for increased support to our undocumented community during the 12-hour hearing that I chaired on May 18th, called Exploring Solutions to the Disproportionate Impact of COVID-19 on Minority Communities. Out of that experience, my team and I decided to focus today's program on ways that those of us who are citizens or are otherwise documented can support our undocumented brothers and sisters. I'm pleased to be joined today by an amazing panel of activists and fighters for justice. I'm going to introduce each of them and give them a brief opportunity to speak about their work with undocumented communities before we jump into a discussion about the issues and concerns facing undocumented people and what we can do to support them during these difficult times. First, I'll introduce Allan Wernick, an immigration law expert and founder of Northern Manhattan Coalition for Immigration Rights. I've known Allan for years and highly respected his legal expertise. Allan gives us a brief sense of what you've been up to these past few months so that the people that are viewing and listening will be able to hear what you've been up to. Allan Wernick.
Thank you so much, Senator Jackson, and I'm so honored to be on this with this distinguished panel. I'm the director of Cuny Citizenship Now and a professor at Brew College. Cuny Citizenship Now is the largest university-based immigration law service program in the nation. Our services are 100% free, and they're available to the public at large. You don't have to be a member of the Cuny community in order to get our services, and we have no geographic or income limitations. And again, all our services are free. Since the pause was put in place by Governor Cuomo, we have been operating, all of our staff, our attorneys, and paralegals, and administrative staff have all been working remotely, continuing to assist applicants for deferred action for childhood arrivals, people who want to seek to renew naturalization. We're helping people with family petitions and applications for permanent residence. So I would encourage people who need our services to contact us at 646-664-9400. That's 646-664-9400, or visit our website at cuny.edu/citizenshipnow, all one word, and we'd be happy to serve you. And it's particularly important that individuals with DACA consider renewing their applications. We expect the Supreme Court to rule on the DACA case. It could be any day now, but my guess is the court will wait until the last day of the session, which is June 29th. And we've been getting adjudications, approvals in about a week on these cases. And we can also help you find, if you can't afford the filing fee, we can help you find financial aid to assist you with that. So please give us a call, and I'm encouraging people to renew their DACA now. So we expect the Supreme Court, if it rules in favor of Trump, to allow people who have DACA to continue in that status. So if you file now and it's adjudicated before the Supreme Court decision, you should have another 2 years in DACA status. But again, thank you, Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Allan. And next, we are going to hear from Jennifer. So Jennifer Hernandez, the lead organizer with Make the Road New York. So Jennifer, thank you for being with us today. And let's hear what you have to say on behalf of your organization.
Of course. Hi, thank you for having me. My name, again, Jennifer Hernandez, one of the lead organizers with Make the Road New York, where we have a base of 24,000 plus members, and a big majority of our membership is undocumented. So we have been having a lot of conversations with our membership about how COVID has impacted our membership. And we have drastically shifted our work to do a lot of the response work. Senator, you mentioned, right, people that were left out of the federal stimulus, people that are undocumented and therefore can't tap into unemployment. And so a lot of our folks have been basically getting $0 in income. So we've shifted our work to try to meet those needs. And we're running a platform with 3 priorities that we're pushing at the moment, which include the creation of a fund for undocumented workers, the push to canceling rent, and the push to decarcerating prisons, detention centers, and to holding police accountable. So we've been doing that and trying to meet those needs in the community through various programs. Happy to be here and to talk about some of the other things that we can do to help this population that has been the hardest hit in our state.
Thank you for coming out. Obviously, your organization, Make the Road New York, is on the ground, and we appreciate you and your organization are out almost everywhere. So next, we're going to hear from Miguel Orea, joins us from the New Sanctuary Coalition, where he is an office coordinator. Miguel, how has the wonderful work of accompanying undocumented friends to their court hearings changed in the past few months?
Hi, Senator. Thanks for that. Yeah. So my name is Miguel. I am one of the coordinators at New Sanctuary Coalition. And as everything has shut down, for the most part, what that has meant on our end in terms of accompaniments has been a lot of planning for the future, trying to get ahead of whose court dates have been canceled, what is going to happen afterwards. And we have continued to push for more telephonic accompaniments being able to be done for our friends who are currently detained. As for the rest of the work that New Sanctuary has done in the time of quarantine, our amazing clinic team has helped file more than 100 political asylum applications since March 15th, about 50 to 75 more various motions and appeals as well. And we have pushed strongly to help release our detained friends who are currently facing really the brunt of COVID-19, because as we all know that anytime an epidemic or anything happens to people in our community, it is always those incarcerated that are the heaviest hit. So we have had many strong campaigns to try to help free them, and have freed quite a few of them. Yeah, and as New Sanctuary, we are continuing to offer our pro se legal services still to this day. And if anyone is still interested, we are working remotely. If you would just reach out to us at 646-395-2925.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming and being on the show today. So next, we're going to, last but not least, we're going to hear from Ximena Bustamante, a community organizer based in Upper Manhattan and a coordinator of Undocumented Women's Fund, a grassroots initiative to identify and meet the needs of undocumented single-headed households, providing direct financial support in areas where no other resources are available. Ximena, by way of introduction, can you tell us about how this fund arose and where are you at this point in time?
Yeah, sure. Just before I go into that, I would like to thank Senator Jackson and his staff for sort of like creating this space to discuss the conditions of undocumented people in the city and highlight like the structural inequalities that have made them one of the groups hardest hit during the current pandemic. I also appreciate this forum at this moment, since we're seeing like massive social unrest and a curfew in our city that is going to affect severely our sort of like undocumented neighbors. So let me get into the fund. We are a mutual aid effort, citywide mutual aid effort that came together when different immigrant organizers and women of color realized that there is like a huge gap in the relief sort of like that has been coming from the state. And we, I mean, I guess that we have been seeing the insufficient response on behalf of the state, and also how there has been no gender lens included, you know, like in any of the programs. So we, sort of like from this analysis, we decided that it was necessary to create a fund that will offer direct financial assistance to undocumented women. And right now we are focusing on those that are heads of household, because we know that those are the ones that are like most severely affected by structural inequalities. And I mean, even though our fundraising effort is like rather modest, some of the things that we're doing is on the one hand, identifying and systematizing needs. Mutual aid groups across the city have actually in the last few months stepping up where the state has failed, right? Like, and we have been sort of like informally hearing all these stories and identifying issues such as food insecurity, housing, which has already, you know, like was already brought up, the access to a dignified burial, and just, I mean, like all these needs that have to do with the sustenance of life, right? Like that usually sort of like women are the ones that, you know, either household in their communities, the ones that are in charge of taking care of these tasks. So we are systematizing the needs of undocumented households with a gender lens. And we are also trying to mobilize resources that already exist. We know that undocumented people in the city are excluded from many services, right? Like, and that's a major sort of like issue. But there are like some programs that undocumented people can access. However, we have realized that there are multiple barriers to accessing even food from food pantries, right? Like we know that many families are scared of going out and going to a pantry and being asked about their status, right? Like, so even like basic resources that are available sort of like have a set of barriers. So what we would like to do is mobilize resources that already exist to cover, to wrap up undocumented women in their households to the best of our ability as an independent project. And lastly, offer direct financial assistance. And all this is done with a framework of building long-term organizing and sort of power, you know, like within undocumented communities. We think that there is not enough organizational infrastructure and resources allocated to fostering projects led by undocumented women and immigrant women. So we really want to focus on that and on creating a political narrative about how this is a gender crisis and how it intersects with documented status.
Thank you. Is there a phone number? Do you have a phone number or an email address?
Yes, of course. Our email address is undocuwomensfund@gmail.com.
Say that again, please.
undocuwomensfund@gmail.com.
Thank you. And our next speaker is, I'm grateful for Sonia Lin, who with us today. She's the Deputy Commissioner in the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. The city government has been pushed to the limit responding to COVID-19, but I have seen the Mayor's Office of Immigration Affairs continuously focusing on our immigrant community. And so, Deputy Commissioner, how has your work changed since COVID-19 has impacted undocumented folks in our community?
Thank you, Senator Jackson, and thank you so much for convening this panel today. For those of you who are not familiar, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, our mission is to promote the well-being of our immigrant communities here in New York City through policies, through programs, through consistent community engagement and outreach, as well as advocacy. And we do this work in close collaboration with our partners within city government, with our elected partners, with our community partners on the ground. And, you know, we recognize that this is a moment of tremendous pain and urgency for our city. We are contending with this pandemic, which has had devastating health and economic impacts for our immigrant communities. It's disproportionately affected New Yorkers of color. And we also recognize that there is a very urgent struggle right now around the fight for racial justice. So we at Moya at this time are continued in our commitment to immigrant New Yorkers. We also recognize the struggles of Black New Yorkers, many of whom are immigrants. And our emphasis right now, as it's been for the last several months, is engagement, you know, constantly engaging with our partners in the community. And the one kind of consistent need that we've heard is a need for more information, more access, broadening access. And so we're really focused on sharing information about city services that are available to all, regardless of immigration status, and working to lower barriers to access to resources and to knowledge for our immigrant communities so they can address the challenges they face. A couple things to highlight, I guess up front. We've designed a guide that provides an immigrant-friendly overview to city resources and services. It has very concise descriptions of various services and programs, eligibility criteria, and the next step that our immigrant communities can take as far as accessing that information and those services. There's a digital version that's available on our website. It's been translated by people, not by Google, into 10 languages. So that's on our website, and there's a PDF that's downloadable that's also on our website that's actually available in 25 languages. So we encourage our partners to access this guide and to share it. It's available at nyc.gov/immigrants/coronavirus. And we are following up soon with a FAQ document that will be available online and in PDF versions that addresses common questions that we're hearing from community members and supplements the resource guide. And, you know, these FAQs and kind of the information that we are trying to make available are really coming from the consistent outreach that our team has continued to do through the last few months, now virtually. Through presentations, through one-on-one engagement, through social media engagement, as well as with engagement with our elected partners, with community and ethnic media. So I think we welcome continued community feedback and are glad to be in conversation with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. And what is the website again for people that missed it and want to write it down again?
Yes, thank you. It's nyc.gov/immigrants/coronavirus.
Excellent. And you say it's in 25 different languages and downloadable. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. So here's a couple of questions. The first one, what were challenges facing undocumented neighbors before the crisis and now during the crisis? So what basically was and what it is now, if you can quickly respond. And I know Miguel, I'm turning to you, Miguel, because you and your organizations were escorting people to court, and now courts are closed. So can you just start off by telling us, obviously you were doing that beforehand, and now what are you doing in order to stay connected to our immigrant brothers and sisters?
Yeah, of course. So the very first thing that I want to touch on, because I don't think it has really received enough attention, especially in the media, is just how confrontational our immigration system can truly be with the people who go through it. So once again, this is a thing that we only learned ourselves through our volunteers, through our accompaniment leaders who would accompany our friends into court every single day. And some of the things that we saw were really horrific and dehumanizing. I would like to bring attention specifically to what we call the FAMU docket, the Family Unit Docket, an issue that really highlights and essentializes a lot of the issues with our current immigration system. And the Family Unit Docket is a mandate that comes from the federal level that has mandated judges to try to push through family units with multiple people through the court system as fast as they possibly can, many of them getting less than 4 or 5 months to prepare from their date of entry to prepare for a court date. Just an absurdly unrealistic time frame for someone to arrive to a new country, to try to, where they don't speak the language, where they need to acclimate, where they need to try to figure out how to find schools for their kids, a job so that they can support them, stable housing. And the federal government has taken the opportunity and in an attempt to deport as many people as they possibly can, to target families, to really focus on the most vulnerable and say, these are the people who are going to give us the least pushback because they're the least capable and we can get them out of the country as quickly as we can.
Miguel, I'm going to speak to others, but you need to tell us a little later, what can we do, okay? So let me turn to Jennifer. Jennifer, please jump in here. And as you know, Jennifer is with Make the Road New York.
Yes. And so I think a lot of folks have already mentioned, right, the issues that we had seen before, even before COVID, which include, of course, like access to healthcare, right, access to services, language access, all these things, right, that were already an issue in especially undocumented communities that have been highlighted by this crisis of COVID, right? Lack of protections for unregulated renters, right? Prices, rent prices, all that stuff was already an issue, right? And so with COVID, we are seeing a lot of these issues highlighted. And people are being left out, right? They're still being left out. The access to services is still there. The lack of access to services is still there. Especially when we talk about parents that have kids that are trying to go to school digitally, right? The access to services, the access to devices, the access to technology, the lack of language access so that parents can actually help their children in school. We're seeing, although there's an eviction moratorium, we're still seeing a lot of landlords that are harassing tenants, right? Even though people are having $0 of income, right? Folks that are relying on food pantries to literally be able to survive and to eat, right? And so these issues have only been highlighted, right? But they existed, right? Public charge, right? That a lot of folks are afraid of, right? And people have mentioned over and over again. Folks that have not gone into emergency rooms when they're sick with COVID because they're scared of public charge. That are not going into pantries, that are afraid to ask for SNAP benefits for their kids. All these things, right? Not being part of a formal job, formal jobs and formal economy, right? Not being left out of unemployment. These are all these things, right? And that's just a short list of things that have been highlighted due to the COVID crisis and that our communities are every day trying to confront and trying to figure out how to navigate without having the proper support.
Thank you. So anyone else can join in. Obviously, I want to know, Allan, with respects to your organization with Cuny Citizenship Now, before you were in the process of working with CBOs to help individuals become citizens, and now since the pandemic and the executive order and shutting down our city and state, how has that impacted your organization, and what are you trying to do to get around the situation?
There are two issues. One is that USCIS has been closed, and they say that they're going to open in New York around June 15th. That's not a hard date, So that means that, thousands and thousands of individuals who have already applied for citizenship have not been able to either be interviewed, and those who've been interviewed have not been able to be sworn in. So that's a big challenge. For us, we are all working remotely, and we have a lot of experience doing that. It's a challenge sometimes because some of the people we're trying to help are not very familiar or comfortable with, online activities. We're encouraging them to get their friends and family members to help them. Everything is taking much longer. All the applications, and of course it's a little bit impersonal. We're trying to use Zoom, but not everyone can do that, and other forms of communication. But we're working it through. But we're unable to help people as quickly as we would like, but we're still helping people, and we don't want people to be discouraged. We want people to go forward with their applications. It's important to note that even though USCIS is closed for interviews, they are still accepting applications. So you can submit your application for citizenship. You can submit your application for your green card. And certainly you can submit your application for DACA because there's no interview for DACA. And as I mentioned earlier, we're getting those turnarounds, approvals on DACA very quickly. So it is a challenge, but we're rising to the occasion. Fortunately, Cuny, the university under which we operate, has been very, very supportive. As you know, we have a relatively new chancellor, and he's very down with what we're doing. And they've done everything they can to help us continue to provide services to the community during this difficult period.
Thank you. So, Deputy Commissioner, so I know that you're busy, but can you maybe just put the framework as to what was it before and what is it like now with respect to your office and everything that your staff is doing to help immigrants? Commissioner?
Thank you, Senator Jackson. So I think I would echo a lot of what we've already heard from my colleagues on this panel. I think we recognize here in New York City that almost 40% of our population is foreign-born, that immigrants make up 44% of our workforce. Immigrants are actually 58% of the essential workers that are kind of keeping our city running right now, and that many immigrants are undocumented in our city. And furthermore, about 1 million New Yorkers live in mixed status households with a member of the household who is undocumented. So our immigrant neighbors are deeply connected to our city, deeply integrated. They are us. And, I think even before this pandemic, we have been very conscious that there are significant disparities that impact our immigrant neighbors, especially those who are undocumented, including higher rates of poverty, challenges accessing services, including healthcare, challenges with overcrowded housing conditions, vulnerability to exploitation, including in the workplace, and challenges due to language. And then underlying this for the last several years in particular, tremendous fear in immigrant communities due to a really toxic national environment and the actions of the federal government. And so none of that has changed now with the pandemic. And the pandemic, I think, as many of my co-panelists have explained, have really laid bare how these disparities are affecting immigrant communities and really exacerbating them. The need for, kind of the essentials of life, with food and housing, concerns about healthcare, the fear and confusion related to public charge, which, so many of us recognized was going to happen with the proposal of the rule is coming to pass. And so, I think it's a tremendously challenging situation for so many of our communities.
Deputy Commissioner, has your workload like doubled, tripled, or you find that our immigrant brothers and sisters are using or turning to the city, your department less than before? I'm just trying to get a gauge as to the volume.
Yeah. I think the volume has certainly increased. We've all made the pivot in my office as well to working from home and shifting our engagement to the phone and to digital and to social media. I think the needs that we're hearing are different because of the moment and the way that this crisis has affected our communities. And so our work has shifted as well to really be focused on supporting sort of the access to information and services and kind of advocating for greater access and inclusion for our communities. And so it's consistent overall, but with a different emphasis due to kind of the tremendous and urgent need right now.
Okay, thank you. So, Ximena, with respect to your organization, Undocumented Women's Fund, is this a new community-based organization or fund that started as a result of COVID-19, or were you in place before that? And if so, or maybe you could tell us, obviously, what's the difference between before and now? And if it's new, why did you start it?
First, I wanted to respond to your the question that you asked me before regarding our phone number. We do have one, which is 929-352-3560. Yeah, I mean, we are actually a mutual aid project. We are not a nonprofit, right? Like we are just like an autonomous mutual aid project that emerged from this crisis as a response to this crisis. As we know, there's like a multiplicity of mutual aid projects that have emerged in the city, and that has been like really inspiring in New York to see how neighbors have stepped up to kind of like take care of each other, right? Like in the absence of a sort of like response by the state. We are new. However, I mean, all of the organizers that are involved in the fund are actually people that have been working around labor, immigration, and like feminist organizing for a long time, and that's what allows us to see like how undocumented communities were being hit and how there was a gap concerning a gender lens, right, in the relief that was coming from public entities, but also from nonprofits. How have things changed? Well, I mean, I guess that's something many of the panelists have already spoke about, all the needs that have to do with the sustenance of life, right? Like that are like crucial when we're speaking from a feminist perspective, right? Like to pay attention to how families are being fed, how they are being housed, who's taking care of that labor. But I guess that I would also like to mention just the conditions regarding exploitation concerning paid labor, like before and after. I mean, as we know, like most undocumented folks work in low wage sectors with no protections and with like shifts of 12 hours, working 6 days per week, no paid sick leave, being always at the risk of like if they demand their rights, being punished because of their documented status. And I guess that this has just been like intensified during this crisis. We've been seeing people that are like fired for being sick, or that have never received paid sick leave when they have been allowed, quote unquote, to take time off if they are sick. We know that care workers, the professionalized ones, have received like no protection, like nurses and sort of like teachers and cafeteria workers at schools, right? But what we do not know is about like low wage care workers, right? Like that have been deemed completely dispensable. Their lives have been dispensable, like while they are taking care of everyone else. And that's why, like for a project like ours, which has a perspective that intersects labor, immigration, and gender, it's so important to highlight this as a crisis of care work, right? Like, because what this situation is revealing is like who takes care of the sick, of the elderly, of children, right? Like, who does that paid labor and what are the conditions, of exploitation in which that is happening, but also who takes care of the unpaid labor. So we know that immigrant and undocumented women are like the majority of low wage care workers. right, are the ones that are like taking care of the sick and the elderly and the children in this moment, which means that, you know, like they cannot take care of their own, right? Like, so there are like these chains of care work that I believe that have just become visible. It's not that, I mean, they were there here before, right? Like, but now they have become visible. So this is why it's so important to bring to the discussion the needs of to having universal programs like universal childcare, right? Like, and different systems for the socialization of care, and also paying attention to the labor conditions of paid care workers, especially in low-wage sectors.
So in essence, your organization started as a result of the COVID-19, and I understand you mentioned mutual aid. For those who do not know, my office established a mutual aid program, and I believe that you are a pod leader. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the purpose is helping neighbors during this pandemic. But let me throw out a couple of other things, and I want to talk about the COVID-19 testing and making sure that we have enough of food for people to eat and shelter over their head. I want to talk about census and how important that is. I want to talk about concern about the curfews that we have and that impact of the curfew on undocumented neighbors of ours. Those are important. Obviously, census, because we get federal money that comes to our city and state in order to provide the type of things that we need. But I've said loud and clear, these are the two most important things for me during this pandemic is people have to eat, have enough food to eat, and shelter over their heads so that they can survive. And then everything else comes after that.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. I definitely do want to highlight some of the services and resources that are available to immigrant New Yorkers, to all New Yorkers, regardless of status, right now with respect to food as well as to health care. Again, there's information about all of this available in Moya's Immigrant Resource Guide specific to COVID, which is available on our website. So I won't go very much into detail, but there are meal hubs throughout the city that are available on weekdays in the mornings for children and families and around noontime for adults. There's no identification or registration required to pick up meals. Nobody will be turned away. You can pick up 3 meals at a time. There are vegetarian and halal options. In addition, the city's meal delivery service has been expanded now to reach additional New Yorkers. It was previously limited to our senior population and is available for those who are unable to go out and get food, either because they're homebound, because of increased medical risk, or don't have sort of friends and relatives who can do so. And that's a resource that can be available, accessed through nyc.gov/getfood. In addition, the city has provided additional funding to food banks and food pantries citywide. We recognize this is a source of tremendous concern for our residents at this time, and have citywide food czar actually and a team dedicated to expanding food access for New Yorkers. On testing and healthcare, remember our public hospital system, Health and Hospitals, is open to all, regardless of immigration status or ability to pay. And there are also excellent federally qualified health centers throughout the city that provide excellent care to everyone, regardless of immigration status. And sort of lists and information about where to find FQHC and to access Health and Hospitals is available on our guide. There is now testing for COVID-19 available at 150 locations citywide. And again, you can find more information through our site, through our guide. But I think one thing I do want to underscore, because it's come up a few times in our conversation, These are resources that are available to all. We recognize there's a lot of fear about accessing these services, accessing healthcare and food and other services people urgently need because of concerns about immigration status and about the public charge rule. There's just so much confusion about this rule, which we very much feared from the time the rule was even rumored. But I do want to sort of underscore a few things. The public charge rule does not apply to all immigrants. It doesn't apply to all benefits. There are a lot of people who are not affected by the rule. There are a lot of services and resources that are irrelevant as far as the sort of impact of the rule. You can get care without fear when it comes to testing, to treatment for COVID. That does not make you a public charge. And there are ways to get more information and help. If you're concerned about immigration and public benefits, New Yorkers can call a free confidential legal helpline through Action NYC. And that number is 1-800-354-0365. It's free, it's confidential. Help is available in about 200 languages or more, and it's available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And if I might just highlight one other resource that many people may not be aware of at this time, and sadly, I think has become one that's very urgent, which is assistance to families for the cost of burials. And so the city has a long-running burial assistance program administered by our colleagues in the Human Resources Administration. We have heard sort of the way on top of the tremendous loss that families are experiencing with the passage of their loved ones, how difficult it is for low-income New Yorkers with meeting the cost of burials. So our colleagues at HRA have put changes into place to make burial assistance more available to more New Yorkers, so that sort of the grant amount for those who are eligible has been raised. Eligibility as far as covering costs has been raised, and the benefit is now available to all, regardless of immigration status. And so that's an important resource that I did want to highlight.
Thank you. I believe that the maximum is about $3,200 or something like that. Help me out if I'm wrong.
The grant amount now has been raised. It was previously $900. It's now been raised to $1,700 in terms of financial support. There is, it's a little technical, I think. There are limits as far as what the total sort of burial assistance cost, or the cost of the burial is capped at $3,400 now, which is also a raise in the cap from before.
Okay, so and undocumented individuals are entitled to that fund also, is that correct?
It is now available to all, regardless of immigration status. That's correct.
Excellent. And let me turn to Jennifer. She wants to speak about one of the subjects that I mentioned earlier, as far as the floor is open. Jennifer, please.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch a bit about the curfew, right? I think it's an added layer of worry for a lot of undocumented folks, right? Especially for folks that are returning to the workforce and that need to travel, right, past these curfew hours. There's a lot of worry of being stopped, of course, and the implications that might have for your immigration status, right? We still don't know. I think there's still some sort of details coming out of around what sort of charges people will get. And I think Miguel wanted to mention some of that as well. But it's just, an added layer of fear, right, for communities that already don't trust the police. And we are seeing right night after night the kind of violence that the police is enacting on a lot of folks out in the streets, and so fear of being victims of that as well, while having implications on immigration status. And then the other only thing that I wanted to point out is that language access, right? Like if people get stopped, right, and only speak Spanish or only speak any other language, right, it's an added fear as well. They can't even communicate if police officers are not fluid in whatever other language. So it's just an added fear. And we've been trying to push out some Know Your Rights and have been developing one-pagers and all that to let the community know about their rights. But it's just, apart from everything that's happening, just the feeling of being stopped, or the fear of being stopped is being added up on that. And in the news, we're also seeing, right, the CBP is going to be supporting these police forces, which is, again, when you're talking about immigration status, right, CBP is a big fear, and CBP is one of the forces, right, that enact deportations. And so it's just over a very bad move.
So, I read a document or when the curfew came out, basically saying that if people are stopped, basically they're saying, where you going? I'm going home, or I'm going to work, or, no matter what time. And supposedly they're not going to be asking for ID. The bottom line, if there are 2 or 3 people standing on the corner, and in my opinion, the police may stop you and say, you have to go home. But supposedly what was said in the questions and answer bulletin is that they basically want people to go home if they not be hanging out in the street. And so, where are you going? I'm going home, I'm going to work. So hopefully that will be okay. Obviously, I was with Jamani Williams and Scott Stringer and Corey Johnson, where we all took a knee at 43rd Street and Broadway for 8 minutes and 40 or 45 seconds, the same amount of time that it took to kill George Floyd. And let me just tell you, if you go and just take a knee for 8 minutes and a half, it's a long time. And that's, I say it was an example of the type of, I guess, pain and agony that Mr. Floyd was under while being basically suffocated to death. But let me turn, if you don't mind, to Allan. Allan, if you're there, can you speak about the impact of how important it is, and from a monetary point of view, and from from a electoral process for representation, about everyone, especially undocumented, filling out census and not being afraid, if you can?
Of course. Thank you. Everyone should fill out their census form. It will not get you in trouble. You will not be ICE. The Immigration Service will not come after you based on information on your census form. It is very important to the distribution of resources within our community. It's important in terms of our representation in Washington. It is important in terms of our representation. It impacts even our representation in New York State. So all I can tell you is, sign up for the census. I've done mine. CUNY, the City University, has a very vigorous, active campaign to encourage people to register for the census. And particularly as we go into the future, we know that in order to protect our undocumented community, we're going to need some legislative changes in Congress. We're going to need Congress to act to provide a path to citizenship for undocumented people. And the census is going to have a big impact on the future representation in the federal government. So I would just urge everyone to do it. And you can do it online. You can do it by mail. And it takes a few minutes.
Thank you, Allan. So all of you, you've been great. We have 5 minutes to wrap up. So I'm going to ask each one of you to be precise and give me a 30-second closing statement, if that's okay. And since we started with Allan, let's go to, I'm looking at Miguel, 30 seconds, Ximena, Jennifer, and the Commissioner, and then I'll close out. So 30 seconds, Miguel.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of briefly touch on what Jennifer said earlier. I think in order to help people who are undocumented fighting the curfew, there has to be a strong public push towards legislators to end the partnerships between ICE and the police immigration between regular police forces. We have seen in the past that things as small as a jaywalking ticket or hopping a turnstile have resulted in deportations. And so it's very important that we help, that part of demilitarizing the police is ending these partnerships that view our friends as enemies in a war.
Thank you. So next, I see on the screen, let's go to Ximena Bustamante.
I guess that I just want to give a shout out to all the people in New York City that have been involved in mutual aid projects, because I believe that, you know, like they have been really making a difference. And I would like to invite everyone to, of course, I mean, oppose the criminalization of social protest and to get involved in their sort of like neighborhood sort of like groups, and also you know, support citywide mutual aid initiatives like the Undocumented Women's Fund. You can find us on Facebook, and you can donate or become involved with the organizing, which is a major sort of like focus of this project. And I guess that organize from the bottom up. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Jennifer from Make the Road, New York.
So yeah, I won't repeat some of the stuff that other folks mentioned, but if you can support our state platform, that'd be great, right? Again, we have 3 priorities that include cancel rent, the funding of an excluded workers fund, and the decarceration of detention centers, jails, prisons, and police accountability. You can find more info on our website, which is maketheroadny.org. And yeah, let's organize.
Excellent. Thank you. And so next, the Deputy Commissioner.
Thanks, Senator. So I just want to say there's tremendous and awesome work being done across the city right now at this very difficult time. There are great volunteer opportunities, so I encourage everyone, if you can, to contribute in some way. And there's information in our resource guide about volunteer opportunities as well. We at Moya, look forward to staying continued in engagement with our partners in the community. And for those community members who have questions, need help accessing any services, our constituent services line is available. You can call the Moya Constituent Services line at 212-788-7654, or send an email to askmoya@cityhall.nyc.gov. And last, I will say that we continue to advocate for more inclusion and more support for our communities. And encourage New Yorkers to make their voices heard, especially to our colleagues in the federal government, to make sure that immigrant communities, undocumented communities are not left out in the conversation moving forward.
Thank you. You use the acronym MOIA, and tell everybody what is MOIA, M-O-I-A.
Thank you. That's the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs.
Excellent. And Allan, you have the last 30 seconds.
Thank you so much, Senator. You've been representing me and my family for decades, and I know you've been a tremendous advocate for immigrants' rights. I just want to remind people again, our services at Citizenship Now are 100% free. There's no income or geographic requirements, and you don't have to be part of CUNY. And I want to give that number again, 646-664-9400. And I especially urge people with DACA to call us about considering renewing or reinstating your DACA status. And thank you again, Senator.
Thank you. So first, let me thank you all for coming on. I'm hoping that obviously people that's watching this on Manhattan Neighborhood Network and also on our Facebook, it's important. I think that Manhattan Neighborhood Network, this program, Represent NYC, gives elected public officials and advocacy groups the opportunity to come in to talk about the issues and concerns that are impacting all New Yorkers. And obviously this is right now. And so I want to thank you all. So I'm up there fighting in Albany. You should know that. We've discussed 50A reforms, and that may be addressed next week. Obviously, as I said, the most important thing is we must feed our families, make sure we have enough food to eat, and then shelter over our head and deal with all the other issues such as education, healthcare, immigration reforms, and all the other things. We have such a mixed bag, but only coming together, working together, will we get it done. So I say go in peace, understanding that we must be able to survive this pandemic and then get back to working and earning the type of income that we all can be proud of. And obviously education is a main part of that.